Aye.
5 makes it 4.
Yes.
I guess out of 6. I can figure this out.
Five
I'm an
is good.
engineer.
The
We're live.
We're live. All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending today's Technical Advisory Committee of the MBTA. I'm Chairman Boyce, and we do have a quorum today. First order of business is the summary notes or the approval of the summary notes of the November 2nd, 2001 meeting. It's been that long since we've been together. Is there anybody opposed or have any questions or comments on the meeting notes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve? Any second?
Okay.
Second. Anybody opposed, say no. Hearing none, it's approved unanimously. So, approval of meeting schedule for the calendar year. Mr. Shree.
I think you have it in your package. It's not changed. We continue to meet on the third Wednesday evening, 7 o'clock at this room. We usually don't meet in August, so that same we are proposing again. So if we, in some cases, we may cancel a meeting if there is not enough information that to share with you and bring you here. But otherwise, that's
Okay. Any questions from the committee or comments?
I guess I will be late next time in April for half an hour. I'm teaching on
You just have to change your teaching schedule.
this week was September. That's why I.
So that you're done in May though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we can survive a half-hour late meal. Any, yes, sir.
Chairman, I just wanted to mention for everyone's benefit, the June 15th meeting is the meeting at which we anticipate asking you to endorse staff recommendations for the fiscal year 2022 to 2027 6-year program. That will be a big meeting for the committee. A lot of the meetings between now and then are going to be informational in nature, but covering both the 6-year program and transaction. But they really are essential informational meetings for you to be sufficiently comfortable with the information to take the actions we'll be asking them to take at that time. So there'll be a corresponding action item for transaction in the second half of the year, but I don't want to stick my neck out right now and say which one of those meetings it's going to be. But it almost certainly will not be December 21.
Thank you for that. The other questions or comments? Do we have a motion to approve said calendar? Motion to approve. Any seconds? Second. All in favor, say aye this time. Aye. No nays. Approved unanimously. Shree, you're up again. The 6-year plan update.
Thank you. So last time we met, we discussed with you about the performance measures and their weights. You remember that was the last action to recommend the authority on weights for the 10 performance measures. We took it to the authority, and the authority had its own discussion and came up with the final recommendation, which we haven't included in here, but it is slightly different from what you recommended, but not a lot. So even after that, what we discussed with you at the meeting is that once they come up with a set of averaging or whichever way they come up with, we will then round it up to the nearest 5 or 10. So two measures have a different numbers than 10. Everything else has 10. So the 2 measures, if you go to your own meeting summary, page 3, you have the table there. That will show your recommended weight, but if you look at the performance measure D1, quality of access to transit and the walk bike network, in your recommendation, that came second in authority's recommendation, that has a top weight, so 15 points for that. And measure G1, transportation system redundancy, has lowest weight, 5%, 5 points. So one has 15 points, the other has 5 points. All the other measures got 10 points. That's how the recommendation came from the authority. So that's just an update from where we left at this committee at the last meeting and what happened at the authority. From that point onwards, our consultant team took all the 26 applications we received. So the first handout you have in the package shows the summary of all those 26 applications, from whom, from which jurisdiction we received it, what is the project, how much is the funding request, what is the total project cost, and what are the primary and supporting modes that is in that sheet. There is one slight correction for number 10, Loudon 028. In the print, it says 32,250,000. The request is actually 35,250,000. That's another question. But this is a summary. So you can see Arlington County has 1 application, Fairfax County has 7, Loudon 4, Prince William 8, City of Alexandria had 2, City of Falls, Manassas, towns of Kern and Leesburg 1 each. So
can anybody explain to me why it costs $140 million to add an entrance to a station?
We will refer you to the staff at Arlington County.
I mean, I'm just appalled, frankly.
So
Concrete ain't cheap, man.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of concrete in building interchanges and winding roads too.
yeah, so yeah, we gave all that summary, I think, in the previous meeting, in one of the previous meetings. We described what about how many projects from which jurisdiction, what kind of projects, what modes, things like that. But moving on from there, what our consultant team did is took up these 26 applications, went through the project description, and we actually met with each jurisdiction to go through the project details. And then the team went ahead and coded that projects into the model. Now, at that point, I will remind you that till the last round of 6-year program, we used a different software, different model setup that was Transims. Now we are using a combination of Cube and DTA Lite. So there was difference in the models we used. And this time we are using the horizon year as 2045 till last few rounds were 2040. So these are 2 main differences we have to keep an eye on. And then some of the measures, I think 2 measures, the E1 factor and E1, they are qualitative measure. It's not coming out of the model. The bike bed environment depends on what kind of bike and pedestrian elements you have in this project, you're adding in this project, and it's weighted by the density around the development density around that particular project. And then the other qualitative measure is safety, where you look again following the VDOT smart scale process. We look at what kind of improvements are being made, and then give a qualitative number for that. If they have certain categories 1 through 4 or 1 through 5, then based on that, you come up with that score for that particular measure. And then as we look at 2040 no build, where 2045 no build condition, what is the performance of their system? And then for each project, we add the project to that network, run the model, and see what changes have happened in these performance measures. So the delta gives the benefit of having this project. So that's a model-based analysis process that goes on. Once you derive that benefit for each project, for each performance measure, that is then all the 26 projects, when you look at them together, you take the most or the best functioning projects, the most benefit you get out of in any of those projects. That particular project has a score of 100. You're trying to scale them now. So that gets a score of 100, and then rest of the projects will get based on that. That's the topmost scoring project getting 100. Then everything else is scaled based on that. That is done for each of the performance measures. So all the performance measures will be now on a 0 to 100 scale, not the actual number. And then you use that the weights that authority approved to calculate a combined score for each project. So that's a process in which that final transaction rating, what we call the transaction rating, is calculated for each of these projects. We are now in a place where we have most of that numbers. We are still finalizing some of them, but we discuss the results with the jurisdiction staff to make sure that we haven't made any major error in coding or anything like that. Makes sense what how we did it. We just finalized those meetings or completed the last of the meetings today. And our team is still working to make sure some of those numbers make sense and correct everything. Once we have that, we put them together so then we can see the whole transaction rating for all the 26 projects. We probably, if we had another couple of days, we would have been able to show you all that numbers too. So that's the transaction rating part. As you know, there are multiple factors to our evaluation of such a program. The other important aspect, as you know, is the condition reduction related to cost, CRRC ratio. From this analysis that I just mentioned, the first two measures are condition reduction measures, A1 and A2. One is condition reduction on auto, and the other one is condition reduction in transit. So we combine that together. The numbers for that actual person hours of delay reduction in those two factors, we add them together for 2045, and we do the same thing for 2030 and extrapolate everything in between using those two numbers. And then we add up that for every year. So we get a total condition reduction due to this project from the year the project will be operational until 2045. So that's a cumulative condition reduction for that project we can get up to 2045. We divide that number, that's the benefit of the project. We divide that with the total cost of the project. So that gives a benefit cost ratio. That's essentially what the CRRC is. And as per the Virginia code, we need to give priority to that weighting, that rank. Not necessarily that we have to exactly follow that ranking, but give priority to that. That's the second item in this evaluation. The third item is the long-term benefit. That's again, Virginia code says that I'm going to get this wording wrong. So let Keith say this. Each jurisdiction should get approximately. All right, let Keith say that.
Long-term benefit is part of HB 2313 from the year 2013. And essentially says that over the long term, member jurisdictions, the 9 member jurisdictions, should receive a benefit from MBTA's regional fund investments that is approximately equal to the share of revenues that can be attributed to each of the 9 member jurisdictions. So jurisdiction A, we can attribute 15% of the revenue to jurisdiction A, then 15% of the benefit should go back to jurisdiction A, approximately over the long term.
How are those benefits derived?
And the way Virginia code is silent on the way it's derived, which in a way is good because it left it to local determination. And so the way we approached that in calendar year 2014, you were involved in this. We had this committee and another committee working on methodology. Committees involved a combination of staff and citizen experts and legal advisors. And essentially, the methodology came down to there'd be two components for long-term benefit. One would actually be dollars. So, almost like a dollar in, dollar out. And the other 50% would be related to where the benefits were actually occurring. We further took the step to look at this from the point of view of where physically the benefits can be attributed to projects, but also another approach where we looked at the people using the projects, where they were coming from and going to. And it was across all modes. There was a limitation, a realistic limitation set that we would use the best available tools and data that was available to us at the time, did the calculation. The long-term, the interpretation was we would wait 10 years to do the first determination. And then after that, it becomes a rolling process. The one departure from the principles that were established in 2014 was that the principle said it should only be applied to completed projects. But in reality, we found that the number of completed projects is not sufficiently large to prevent some serious skewing of the analysis, because the projects that were completed tended to be a certain type of small project, or so the bigger projects haven't really had any effect in that, and that would potentially cause some skewing. So we calculated the completed projects to be compliant with our own principles. We also calculate it for all projects that we've had funding on, regardless of whether we've even funded the whole project or not.
There was a lot of discussion about this being a regional body, that the investments are for the region, not specific to individual members of the region.
That's right.
We spent a lot of time talking about this stuff.
The law requires we actually look at.
It's kind of quiet about the requirement. It just says that thou shalt make sure that things are equal. And that's a paraphrase, but
Approximately equal over the long term.
yeah, and that's an oversimplification of what it is, but it essentially waters down to Fairfax County shouldn't get everything. Right.
But in the sense that a project in Fairfax might give great benefits to people who live in Loudoun.
So the people who work in DC and travel on roads through Fairfax to get to Prince William, they're getting the benefit from that. So that was the regional body idea, that the benefits aren't just for the counties where the money's spent. There's people in the region that go here, there, and everywhere.
So the attempt made to capture those.
Yes, and that's what he was, one of the measures he was saying was, it's not just per jurisdiction, it's the cumulative benefit derived by the models that show there's this benefit over the cost that benefited everybody.
Yeah, I mean, even the calculation of 10 years was interesting, because our first year of revenue was fiscal year 2014. We're currently in fiscal year 22.
Very close.
But
we've allocated funds out to 2025. So we're kind of in the range. However you look at it, we're in the 10-year range, and the intention, the application of the law as we approach it, and Shree's kind of touching on here, is essentially we look at the 9-member jurisdictions, because that's what's covered. Towns get rolled into their parent county. cities as standalone entities. And essentially, we categorize jurisdictions into above, below, or in the middle, or approximately equal, should I say. So more than, less than, or approximately equal. And we strive towards approximately equal. So if there is a jurisdiction A contributed or attributed 10% of the revenue, if we calculate that they've accrued 15% of the benefit, then that's great for them, they're overperforming, but now we've got to find a way to bring that back towards 10%.
How do you determine how much revenue?
Oh, that's easy.
That's the easy part of the whole thing.
How is it?
Revenue receipts.
I just asked my CFO. It's sales tax, so they can relate it to
Grocery tax is part of that.
where it's generated. I mean, it's not as simple as that, but it's mostly very
It's
straightforward.
easier figuring out where the money goes for jurisdiction wise.
So the money side is pretty straightforward. It's the benefit side is the complicated part. And so we're kind of constantly trying to think about ways to bring everybody back to their percent. But you can never do that in one cycle. And you can never get all 9 in harmony at the same time. And some of the jurisdictions are actually very small, so that,
Does the need to achieve balance go into the analysis of the six-year plan?
it doesn't go, it does go into the analysis from the point of view of, and I think this cycle will probably be the first time we've really applied this strongly, is that if we see a jurisdiction that has received more than the benefit that it should have received related to revenue, then it's possible that we may not recommend a project that might otherwise be recommended.
Or vice versa?
Or vice versa. Exactly. It works both ways.
The board has been pretty good about balance because they all have the representatives on the board. It doesn't take much for one of them to say, hey, so.
You're exactly right. We've always applied modal and geographic balance at the end of our recommendations. And although that's not the same as long-term benefit, it has had the effect of bringing the calculation pretty close to where it should be, but it's not exactly there. And I think, no great secret, because we shared this last time. Prince William and Loudoun counties were overperforming. Arlington was underperforming, and Fairfax was pretty close. Not exactly, but pretty approximately equal. And then the smaller jurisdictions, Alexandria, well, the cities, Alexandria is a bit different, but Manassas Park, Falls Church, City of Fairfax. To be honest, it's all in the noise. It's really hard to see whether they are approximately equal or not, but they appear to be pretty close. So the focus really is on how we kind of bring Arlington, Loudoun, and Prince William a bit more into balance. So that may play out.
It's more at the board level that what we're doing is not part of the calculus as much.
I mean, you'll be able to weigh in on what you think about the methodology, the calculation, whether it's the right recommendation.
You could speak up right now and say Arlington County's only got one project on here, and it's a very expensive west entrance.
The need should does come into it. This project has been floating around for 25 years.
Is that truly a Arlington County thing, or is it metro? There's that argument.
Well, we won't get into
We're not
project
going to do that
selection.
today. We digress.
We just at the other end of the spectrum, we're talking about.
Yeah, we don't have that yet. We will come to that, but not yet. So, yeah, I was, when I started talking, Steve handed out a larger sheet here, which if you look at, it's the same information as the left side of that table is the same information as we had handed out earlier. It was in the packet. The right side, all those empty cells, that's what we are starting to fill in now. So that rightmost, I will start from the rightmost two columns that start with CRRC. So that's where we will fill in the condition reduction related to cost, rating, and the rank. The two columns before that are the transaction project rating and that rank. So that's what I said, the first 10 performance measures when we do that rated rating, that's what the transaction rating is. Then two columns before that, you see long-term benefit, which we just discussed. Everything from the previous column all the way to the empty column on the left, these are what we call the qualitative considerations. So over and beyond all these quantitative measures we are looking at, whether it is then performance measures or the cost benefit analysis or long-term benefit analysis, there are so many other things that we need to consider. So it includes, for example, external funds. You have a huge project at high cost, but then you already have funding from various sources. Most of the funding, you need a small amount from us. Versus a small project, but you need the entire funding from NVTA. So then we look at that, how much money, external money are you bringing to the table here? So it's basically leveraging other funds for a project. You can see some of the criteria that we have at the bottom. So we kind of look at that and say, yeah, you should get some benefit, or you should be, you are bringing more money from other sources, so you should get some advantage for that. And then past performance is another one that we look at. Now that, as you said, we already have more than 10 years of worth funding allocated to various projects and jurisdictions. And many of these projects, some of the projects are already completed, many other projects are ongoing. We want to make sure that those those projects are performing well, or the jurisdiction is performing well in moving those projects. So you said that you need X amount and we will complete that project in the next 2 years or 3 years, and you finished it, that means your performance was good. But if you are dragging on and on and on for 5 years, 10 years, then your performance is not good. Again, there may be valid reasons for some of those projects to drag on. We just want to understand that, and some of them may not have that kind of a valid reason. Then we want to track that too. So that's what we're calling the cost part. We look at it at the jurisdiction level, and if there is a project that already got NVTA funding in any of the previous rounds, then we specifically look at that project level too. Those are two of the big ones I can take example and discuss. So we also look at what was called project readiness, or if you said the project needs funding and if the project will be completed in the next 2 years versus another project that will get completed only 10 years later, the project that gets completed soon is going to get the benefits too soon, right? So that's like project readiness. It will again, once we fund it, it will go back to past performance. You said it will get funded, it will get completed in 2 years, but if you're trying, then the project past performance is going to go low. So these sort of qualitative measures, which we cannot really draw out of the model or other things, we consider those too. So these are the quantitative and qualitative measures. Right now, we are starting to fill in this table, and hopefully pretty soon we can share that draft with you all. One thing that will not be captured in this table, but we still consider for our making our recommendations, is the public engagements, public comments. Let's keep talk about that, so that will also take you to the next steps in our process, program process, and some of the schedules associated with that.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just before I talk about the public kind of end of this, a couple of things that are not on here, which I mentioned earlier, modal balance and geographic balance. We can only do that at the end when we see what the numbers are telling us, and then we say, is this modally balanced? Is this geographically balanced? And if it's yes, then we don't change anything. If it's not, then we start to move things around a bit. The other major thing I would say that we didn't mention, which you need to keep in mind because this question always comes up, is you've got all of these factors you're considering. How on earth do you make a decision? How do you actually get a composite score from all of these factors? Well, we don't strive to get a composite score because we think that will be meaningless. So what we do, and this is consistent with HB 2313 from the year 2013, which does state something, I'll paraphrase, something to the effect of MBTA should give priority to projects that achieve the greatest congestion reduction relative to cost. So that's the last two columns on this table. So the first thing we do after we've populated this table will be to resort it based on the rank in the very last column. So you see things very nicely kind of alphabetically by county, city, and town at the moment. That will change when we obviously resort this. And from that point onwards, that really drives the thinking. So the default position is all else being equal. Once it's ranked by CRRC, then we just go down the list till we run out of money. We don't know how much money we're going to have yet. We'll know that in a couple of months. But that's not actually what we do. We do go down the list until we run out of money, but then we start looking at these quantitative factors to see whether some of those actually need to be addressed. And that will then potentially do something from below the line to above the line. If something goes above the line, then something that's already above the line has to kind of be modified in order to make the lines match.
For those new to the committee, that's when it's fun.
The congestion reduction, is that current year or the opening year?
Well, as Sri described it, we do a model run for 2030 and 2045. And so we kind of get a calculation for each of those 2 years. And then in the absence of doing a model run for every year in between, we extrapolate between the two, and for projects that will be open prior to 2030, which many of them will, then we kind of back extrapolate to the year of opening, but using the same 2 points, 2030 and 2045. So we then calculate congestion reduction by year and add it all up and then divide by the project cost. It's not perfect. It's not a cost benefit analysis. Many years ago, we proposed doing a cost benefit analysis, and the guidance we got at that time was to not do that and do this instead. And we've not revisited that decision since probably about 2015, 2016, maybe 2015 probably. So that's the way we've done this. So that we have to take into account cost because that's what's written in the Virginia Code. And we have to take into account congestion reduction. Our consultant team does the best job that can be humanly done to have a consistent approach that covers all those. But obviously, models of cope with highway projects much better than they cope with other sorts of
The
projects.
whole measure of congestion reduction would tend to lead to favoring projects that included, highway capacity improvements.
Yes, although the analysis done years has shown that a transit project can also score well.
Pretty good change.
And ITS projects score well. I mean, we've even had bike fit projects that score
Yes,
well.
can be a highway capacity.
Well, there was one year where VRE improvement and an ITS project were 1 and 2. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the consultants do a really good job in applying a consistent approach that really does embrace all modes. And at the end of the day, so we strive for mode and geographic balance at the end. There are some things on here that relate to the modes. There's also a column called other, which could be anything. We just don't know at this stage what other will include, but there will be some projects where there'll be a specific notation that there's something about this project which makes it a very strong contender, or maybe something that might be recommended but shouldn't be recommended. It works both ways. The other thing I would say on here is continuation. It's not on here, but we also do know which projects are continuation projects, i.e. those projects we have funded previously, but not fully funded previously. There's no obligation on the part of MBTA to fund projects to completion. There is, however, a kind of expectation that we will. We thought it was a good project to put design money on, and it's probably a good project to put construction money on, but we reserve the option not to do that. It really depends what's in the candidate pool each 2-year cycle. It depends on how much money we got. So, some projects, it happens, but every cycle we tend to find a mixture of continuation projects and completely new projects. So I wouldn't say it's really tilted one way or the other, but it is something to take into account. It's a complicated process. I don't promise simplicity and Virginia code the way it's written anyway. I mean, I don't think the General Assembly set out to make it complicated, but with legislation being passed at different times and language that is vague or in some cases contradictory, we have to work our way through it. So it's not a beautiful process, but it is an interesting.
I have had to do metropolitan area project rankings, and I understand the difficulty and the complexity thereof.
Our goal is not for you to necessarily agree with what we do, but to at least acknowledge what we've done.
That's where it gets fun.
And that's where it gets fun. So anyway, he handed over to me to talk about public comment. And so just very quickly, we plan to begin public comment on April 15th. That's when we will formally release the information publicly. We have a public hearing now scheduled for May 12th, which is prior to and on the same evening of the regular second Thursday of the month authority meeting. It'll be at 7 p.m. here, but we'll also be offering virtual phone-in type connectivity so people don't have to come here. We will not be doing an open house here that night as we have done in the past because the planets have aligned this year and there is a mandatory joint transportation agency meeting that's required by Virginia Code that involves us, MBTC, DRE, BDOT, DRPT, maybe missing one. And so that meeting is actually hosted by BDOT at their offices in Fairfax, and that's scheduled for May the 4th. So hopefully you'll be with us, so 4th be with you. So that I think is the open house. So they'll have in their own public hearing that night, not our public hearing, but prior to their public hearing, there's an open house that we are obliged to be at anyway. And so we thought, well, that's the best place to do our open house, where there's going to be a much bigger turnout and it demonstrates regional coordination anyway. So I think the timing of the public hearing currently is 6 p.m. So the open house will begin at 5 p.m. It's about an hour, which is what we would do if it was here. And we also have, so the public comment period will end 10 days after the public hearing, which will be May 22nd. And then we'll kick into very high gear at that point with recommendations and so on. With a view to getting to authority adoption at the July meeting, which I think is the day, but anyway, the second Thursday of July is what we're aiming for. But also, as it happens again, stars coming into alignment. Friday, May 20th is the annual Bike to Work Day, which we typically participate in somewhere. So we're hoping that that'll be kind of like an on the road type open house opportunity as well. But we don't have any details on that other than it's on that day. But as to where we'll be at. So we'll let you know that as soon as we know it. I think that covers everything on the engagement side. That's all we've got.
That's all we have for 6-year program. If you have any questions on evaluations or methodology, we have our team here to answer any of your questions.
And we have the packet includes the 26 projects.
Yes.
If you want to get familiar with those.
Yes, that's the 2 packets that we had there. That's all the 2-page summary of all the applications.
On the methodology report, which I think was being finalised at the last meeting, and we wanted to make sure you had the final version of that. I think we did email it out, but
Yes.
it's provided there as well. So that's the methodology the consultant's using to come up with the transaction ratings. We wanted to be completely transparent about that.
Did that cover the transaction plan update, or is that
No,
actually, okay? That was,
No,
that
this
was
was
item
actually
4,
worked out.
now we're on item 5.
we can jump onto that item, yes. So not a lot to say there, except that our team is again, to do the 6-year program, we had to first finalize that use the new model to come up with a transaction base. So we have a base model ready for transaction. Now, currently, we are finalizing the project list. So last time when we talked, we said we had the bottom-up project list, what we call the bottom-up project list, ready. So we worked with all the jurisdictions, agencies to come up with a list of projects that they think needs to be included, that they are going to pursue in the next 20 years, 25 years. So that we put all that together. That was the bottom-up project list. That was ready by the time we last met. Subsequently, our team looked at the needs for the region from now until 2045 and came up with various gaps and things like that. And then as a team, we all, along with discussing with the staff from jurisdictions and agencies, we are almost finalizing another set of projects that we call the top-down projects, because no one jurisdiction or agency came up with that idea, but when we looked at, there are some gaps that needs to be filled, and we were, from the professional judgment we are trying to identify some projects to fill those gaps. This includes transit projects, bike and pedestrian connections, and some technology projects. It's specifically our transportation technology strategic plan has identified all the strategies and actions. So based on that, and some of the other projects we are involved with, like the R3P, we looked at all those aspects and came up with some additional projects from looking at from the technology perspective. So we are just about finalizing that top-down project list. Once we have that, we can share it with you all, so you'll see the close to 400 projects that we will have into transit. And once we finalize that list, team will start running the future model, 2045 model, with all those projects built. Around the same time, you will also be working on the scenarios. So we discussed about different scenarios. We have been thinking 3. We kind of narrowed down the 4th one. We are still debating, and you all agreed that first let's see those 3 scenarios and what that does, and probably then we can choose some or other elements from those scenarios to create a 4th scenario. So that work is also about to start in full fledged. So we have a set of analysis, transaction-related analysis coming through in the next month or so. So that's where the technical side of those analysis, the transaction update right now. That also, once we have that information, transaction also should go to the public engagement, public comments. We are making sure that first we finish the 6-year program engagement and then start the transaction public engagements. so that it's not overlapping and confusing. Again, I will hand it over to Keith to talk about that aspect of transaction.
Right, thanks, Sri. So on the evening that we currently anticipate MBTA taking action to adopt a 6-year program, we also anticipate asking them to approve the date of the public hearing for transaction, which will be in September. So July, August. So it'll be 2 months out. We probably won't start the public comment until about the beginning of August. So our public comment period will run through August and then through most of September as well. And then, you know, we kind of are looking to get transactions adopted by the end of the calendar year. But right now we're in what we call phase 2 of transaction, which apart from being the bit between phase 1 and phase 3, it's also the bit where there's not a lot of public engagement that you know, would naturally be taking place. So in phase 1, we had, you know, the kind of the go out and get an understanding of needs and priorities, which we did over the last summer with focus groups, pop-up events, the online survey, and so on. In phase 3 will be the formal part of public comment. So in phase 2, what we're doing just to kind of keep interest going and begin to build up to phase 3 public engagement, we're doing a couple of things. We've done the 4th iteration of our transportation perception survey, which was conducted in December of last year, and the consultant team reported that out to MBTA at their meeting last week. We haven't included in your packet, but if you're interested, we can send you a link to where it is. It's on the homepage of our website now, so it's fairly easy to find if you want to go see it. It's really interesting because it gives you a snapshot in time about how Northern Virginians feel about transportation. But because it's the 4th iteration, you kind of get to see a longitudinal series as well. So you can see how attitudes have changed since the first survey, which was done in 2015. Obviously, with the pandemic, it has greatly affected the way people feel about transportation over the last year. And so, you know, as well as being part of a longer trend, it also gives us, if you like, a pandemic benchmark as well. So we can kind of see how we emerge from the pandemic in the years ahead with future iterations of this. But anyway, it's an interesting read. Covers a lot of ground. Northern Virginians seem to be a much happier bunch than they were when we first did this survey, and a lot more of them have heard of MBTA in the intervening time as well, which we also take some comfort from. A lot of support in Northern Virginia by Northern Virginians that transportation investment is important, and the region as a whole, from a performance card perspective, is actually considered to be doing very well. Yeah, that's a trend we also keep. So that's the perception survey. We're also doing, and actually we generated some micro moments from that, which are more for social media. But the other thing we've been doing recently, and this will be continuing for another month or so at least, are a series of what we call blog posts. They're brief posts that focus on a transaction-related topic, and that they're building a story which kind of itself will become a part of the transaction plan when we get to that point further down the road. So we've done one so far which kind of explains how transactions, 6-year program interrelate, and how they relate to Virginia code. And we've got a nice new graphic in there which kind of shows how everything fits together. We've looked at growth in the region over through to 2045. We're starting to look at the nature of travel, origins, destinations, and so which is it's an absolutely fascinating read. And these are all short. I mean, it's like if they're on a piece of paper, they'd be 1-2 pages long, with mostly graphics or charts, tables, whatever. And then we got more to come, which we'll build to actually, I think, quite a compelling story. So that they're on the transaction website. If you need that link, let me know. But I think it's MBTA transaction.org or something like that. So please, you get a chance to take a look at that too. So I think that covers where we are with the public engagement side of transaction.
Yeah, that's what we have. But yeah, gear up for getting a lot of analysis based on transaction in probably 2 months from now.
If you want data, we got data.
Oh, boy. Questions from the committee at all?
When is the proper, are we going to click on the technical memoranda, or is this the proper time to do that?
Depends on what you're going to bring up.
Well, I had a couple questions about it. For the record, we were told last fall that in the computation of person hours of delay, you used either the free flow travel time or the speed limit, whichever was less. That's not what it says in the documentation. So I'd like to confirm which it is. And also, can you tell me how the free flow time is developed? Is it just off whatever is coded in COGS models?
Yeah, basically, well, just to confirm, but it's just basically free flow based on the speed limit, based on what.
So the free flow is never faster than the speed limit?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
I'll let you know.
That has been how it's been.
You got the flow from our model?
Yeah. Well, it's based on the posted speed.
The original data in the model, you can carry it from our model. I mean, the model you have.
Yeah,
Right.
the model is based on the.
Right, that's correct.
Then that's the clock speed.
The crash mitigation factors are from something called Smart Scale, which is, what is that?
Okay. That's the state of Virginia's, competitive grant program.
Okay, so you have no control over.
No, the crash modification factors are, industry standards for how different types of treatments affect reducing crashes. But
I guess I was
Yeah.
surprised that adding a new interchange at what is now an at-grade intersection is only considered medium for crash mitigation.
You increase speeds, which increases the severity of crashes.
Okay.
That's where that comes from.
The other one,
This is out of
and,
the highway safety.
and the other one that would have absolutely no impact on anything in this analysis, but way down at the end, where you talk about install lighting at transit stops. I wasn't sure if that meant putting lights that illuminate the shelter or the pedestrian waiting area or the crossing. And it really makes a big difference whether it's at a signalized intersection or not, as would make a big difference if it's lighting up an existing crosswalk. Whereas putting a light where at an existing intersection where there's already some sort of lighting and protection wouldn't make much difference, but I'm sure that will not be a deciding factor in any project that comes before this committee.
Right. Yeah, I mean, as described, the safety and also the D1 and E1 measures are really more qualitative. And so for the safety measure, which is E1, it's looking at, getting basically the description of the project, going for those improvements and getting points and using that low, medium, and high to decide how many points.
Thank you.
Playing the part of Monica tonight is Mr. Jasper.
Not playing it very well, but in addition to what I said earlier about the date for the public hearing, May 12th, and the open house, May 4th, and the public comment period, April 15th through May 22nd, Monica also wanted to make you aware again, I think, that we have the roundtable coming out on March 30th. It's virtual, it's free, but we do ask you to register, otherwise we can't send you any information ahead of time. It's actually a fantastic couple of panels. The first one looking at electrification, Senator Boysko, Fairfax Supervisor Alcorn, OmniRide CEO Bob Schneider, and from current TPB staff Jeff King, who's really, I think, one of the reasons, leading experts on all the reasons why electrification of the transportation system is a real challenge. So that's the first panel. And the second panel, it's looking more at innovation type topics. So we have RM3P, kind of like our in-house project with the Commonwealth. And Dalia Levin from Cambridge is going to be talking about some technology stuff that's going on in transaction around the world. We have a speaker from the city of New York who's going to be talking about their plans for congestion pricing in the city. And we have Greg Rogers from Neuro, which is the company that makes all those little coolers on wheels that go around delivering pizzas to students and the like. But just this whole looking at automation of vehicles, but not from a passenger perspective, freight delivery perspective, which I think, since you've got it on your campus, I don't think Neuro provides the devices that are on your campus, but they certainly have something similar, actually a bit larger. So we think that'll be interesting too. And there's also a guest speaker who I can't say any more about because I'm not sure if it's actually going to happen or not, but I don't want to raise expectations and then destroy them, but we are hoping to have an additional speaker as well with some remarks. So that's March 30th. And then the final thing she wanted to say was the April meeting of the authority was scheduled for April 14th. It will not take place on April 14th because of quorum issues. They are looking at April 21st as the alternative. There may be quorum issues with April 21st as well. So I have no idea that leaves us. Watch this space. We'll let you know when the authority meeting will be. And if it doesn't actually happen and we have to cancel it, then like I say, the May agenda is going to be pretty interesting with a public hearing for the first couple of hours of the evening. So we can only do what we do with the availability of authority members. That was the final thing she wanted to say.
We're at 59 minutes, perfect. I'll open it up for any questions or comments or motions to adjourn.
Overjoyed.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye, go. You also get the side swipe.